give out, which just happened occasionally. It was very weird. All right. It looks like happened occasionally. It was very looks like we're live. So Taylor, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. My name's Taylor Sear, and thank you for the invitation. I'm really excited to chat with you. I'm assistant professor of philosophy at Samford University, which is in Birmingham, Alabama. Um, I specialize in free will mainly, but I'm also interested in some other related areas of philosophy related in metaphysics and in ethics. Been getting into some stuff on time travel recently, but I'm kind of interested in everything in philosophy. So, um, be very happy to talk about free will. I should say, if people are interested in a deeper dive on free will, my friend Matt Flummer and I have a podcast all about free will called The Free Will Show, and we have a YouTube channel, but it's an audio podcast, so you can check it out on Apple or Spotify if people are interested. They can go there.
What is it called? Like, do we have a link?
It's just called The Free Will Show. It should show up if you search it in podcast platform.
Awesome. So free will. Are you a libertarian free willist or compatibilist free will? What kind of free will do you subscribe to?
I'm a compatibilist, and my friend Matt, who hosts the Free Will Show with me, he kind of waffles. I'm not sure. It depends. He says that it depends on what side of the bed he wakes up on, but I think he tends towards libertarianism. So we have some friendly disagreements from time to time.
So what is compatibilism and how does it relate to determinism?
Good. So this is going to sound deceptively simple, but compatibilism usually just means that free will and determinism are compatible. So um, it's deceptively simple because it depends on what you mean by free will and determinism, and then there are lots of different variations of compatibilism. But that's the basic idea: is that even if the world were deterministic, we could still have free will. So it's different from determinism in that it doesn't necessarily require determinism. I mean, most compatibilists nowadays don't really take a stand on whether the world is deterministic or not. They say that if it is deterministic, we could still have free will. But we sort of leave that for the physicists and cosmologists to figure out. And as of now, I think most physicists lean towards thinking the world's indeterministic, but there are some deterministic interpretations of contemporary physics. So yeah, we don't really know. That's not our field. But anyway, what does it mean to say that the world's deterministic? Usually, in at least in the philosophical conversation about free will, what people mean is just that there's only one way that the future can unfold from here. There's just one physically possible future. So, like, given the state of the world now, or even given the state of the world a million years ago, if the laws of nature are deterministic, then yeah, there's only one way that things can unfold from there. So if you think of the laws of nature as like a function, and the a time slice of the whole universe, like the state of everything at any given moment, as a kind of input into the function, the output would be what would happen at the next moment, or you could go from there to find out what would happen at the next moment, and so on and so forth, so that there's only one way the future could unfold consistent with the laws given any particular input. So yeah, that's determinism. I don't know if you want to jump in and ask for more about that.
Well, yeah. So my first question would be: is that as a typical determinist, I'm fine with compatibilism, but how exactly do you get moral responsibility and free will? How is it free in any sense given determinism?
Right. This is a good question. I think part of the reason that the main debate right now, and maybe for the last, well, who knows how long, it's been one of the main questions in the free will debate for the, as long as there's been a free will debate, which has been millennia. This main question is, yeah, is free will compatible with determinism or not? Like, you can divide everyone into these camps: compatibilists and incompatibilists. You mentioned libertarianism earlier, and I said my friend Matt kind of leans that way. Libertarians are the people who believe in free will but think that it's incompatible with determinism. And so, like, among those who think there is free will, they disagree on this compatibility question. There are also skeptics about free will. They might be determinists who think determinism precludes freedom, or they might just think, well, determinism or indeterminism we don't have free will. So anyway, those are the main positions. Now, compatibilism is probably the most widely held view among philosophers, but I wonder if you sampled, like, it's sort of hard to ask people who aren't specialists in philosophy for what their view is, because you have to, like, basically make them become a philosopher, teach them all the terms, and give them some of the arguments, and then yeah, maybe it's a spoiled sample, but it's hard to tell. Some people think incompatibilism is a more natural view. It seems like determinism would take away moral agency and free will. So my view is that, well, unless we're given some reason for thinking that determinism would preclude free will, well, why not think they're compatible? You need some good argument for their incompatibility. So then the question becomes, what are the arguments, and should we be persuaded by them? And there are several different kinds of arguments for incompatibilism, which is challenging the truth of compatibilism. And the two main ones have come to be known as the consequence argument and the manipulation argument. Maybe I'll just sketch the first of these, and then if you want to, talk about more reasons not to be a compatibilist in a bit, we could look at the other one. But the consequence argument, I think it's been around for a really long time. It maybe is a way of kind of um, regimenting the common incompatibilist intuition into a real argument, but it became very uh, precisely developed, and it became very popular in the 1970s and 80s, thanks in a large part to the work of Peter Van Inwagen. And the way that he formulates the argument, the basic idea is something like this: the way the world was in the distant past, say 1,000 years ago, say 1,000,000 years ago, wasn't up to me at all. Like, I wasn't around. Nothing I do now has an effect on what the world was like 1,000,000 years ago. Um, but also, the laws of nature aren't up to me at all. It's not like I can decide whether it's consistent with the laws that I go faster than the speed of light or not, or how gravity will work. That's just outside of my control too. But if determinism's true, um, well, what I do now, everything about the world now and all the way into the future, is just the inevitable consequence of the way the world was 1,000,000 years ago and the laws. So it looks like if those things weren't up to me, and what I do now is an inevitable consequence of those things, that it's not really up to me what I do now. So that's the basic idea of the consequence argument. Um, I use this expression, it's being up to me whether I do something, which doesn't mention free will explicitly, but you can tell it's a kind of related idea. If something's not up to me, it doesn't seem like I'm freely doing it. Um, I think the best way to respond to this argument, and this is one of those places where compatibilists can disagree. We have a bunch of different positions, um, and different responses to this kind of argument. But I tend to think this argument is good, um, at showing that a certain kind of freedom, we might call it leeway freedom. That's a term that philosophers sometimes use, or like the freedom to do otherwise than what we actually do, maybe like the ability to do otherwise or alternative possibilities. It looks to me like this argument is pretty good in showing that if determinism is true, we lack that kind of freedom. We lack the ability to do other than what we actually do. So you might think, oh, wait a second. I thought you said you were a compatibilist. Don't you think freedom and determinism are compatible? Well, in a sense, I am a kind of incompatibilist, because I think this argument can show that certain kind of freedom is incompatible with determinism. But what I care about, what you asked about, is moral agency. There's different ways of taking that, but one way that's relevant here is like being the source of your actions, such that you can rightly be praised or blamed for what you do. Like, um, you're really accountable for what you do, morally responsible for it. And one way of using the term free will is just to refer to whatever kind of control we would need to have over our behavior to be morally responsible for it. And I think that you can have that kind of freedom even without the leeway freedom or the ability to do otherwise.
How so?
So
What
my
is that kind of freedom exactly?
Yeah, this is yet another place where you can get finer distinctions and different positions within the compatibilist camp. But in my view, it has to do with, um, what actually brought about your behavior. And that's one way of capturing this is the idea of sourcehood, being the appropriate source of your behavior. Um, what does that mean? Well, here is a case, a thought experiment due to philosopher Harry Frankfurt. These kinds of cases have come to be called Frankfurt style cases that make it seem like you could be responsible for what you do. You could be the source of your behavior, even without leeway freedom, even without the ability to do otherwise. Okay, so imagine that you're about to vote in an election and you haven't quite made up your mind which of two candidates to vote for, and you're on your way to the voting booth. Let's say maybe you're even in the voting booth and you're making a last minute decision about which candidate to vote for. Unbeknownst to you, last night while you were sleeping, you were not aware of this at all. Um, this nefarious neuroscientist inserted a chip in your brain and made it so you never found out about it. And what this chip allows the neuroscientist to do is to monitor your deliberative activity to see whether you're leaning more towards one candidate or the other, what kinds of reasons are occurring to you. It's creepy, but imagine that this is what the neuroscientist has done. And suppose also that the neuroscientist is able to activate this chip in your brain to override your decision making abilities, to force you to decide to vote one way or the other. So suppose there's two candidates, A and B. You're leaning towards candidate A, and it turns out that that's what the neuroscientist wants you to do is to decide and then vote for candidate A. And so the neuroscientist is watching. If you had shown any sign that you were going to vote for candidate B instead, if you were leaning towards that decision, the neuroscientist would have pressed their button and forced you to decide to vote for candidate A. But as it happens, the neuroscientist doesn't intervene at all, other than inserting the chip and monitoring. There's no overriding of your agency in making this choice. And so what you do is you decide to vote for candidate A, and you go and do that on your own, as it were, without any intervention from the neuroscientist. That looks like a case where you are morally responsible for making the choice. Suppose it's the better candidate and you're a little bit praiseworthy for choosing to vote for candidate A. Looks like you're morally responsible for that. It also looks like you couldn't have done otherwise than decide to vote for candidate A, given that if there was any kind of leaning towards the other direction, you would have been forced to vote for candidate A. Looks like you lacked freedom to do otherwise. So there's like it's been more than 50 years now since Harry Frankfurt made these cases very popular, and there's a whole cottage industry of papers and collections of articles on whether these work, whether these Frankfurt style cases work. But even if even if there's some debate to be had about whether they work, I think they highlight that there's at least this position that's possible, that you could have moral agency and moral responsibility, even if there was something that precluded your freedom to do otherwise. So
Well, how
that's
so?
kind of
What
how
would
I
be
think about
the definition of moral responsibility in that case? Because if you are determined by the prior states of nature or whatever to choose candidate A, or be determined by those reasons, how exactly do you have moral agency in that case? And like, or if it was a criminal case, like if you killed somebody, say you decided to
it.
kill someone and you were predetermined by the states of nature, why would we hold you morally accountable for that when it was determined by the prior states of nature and you didn't have a choice?
Yeah, good. I guess I want to say there's a sense in which you don't have a choice, in that what you're going to do is, in a sense, rendered inevitable by those prior conditions. But I also want to say that you do have a choice in another sense, in that it really is your choice. You are deciding to perform this kind of action, and you're going through with it without being, let's say, coerced or in any way compelled to do it.
So what do you
So
define as your choice there? Is it just your brain states acting in a way that essentially is a natural result of nature that hasn't been impeded by some other external force?
yeah, that's the most minimalist way to do it, and I do lean in that direction. Another way to go, and I when I was in grad school, I was more attracted to this kind of view, and maybe I'll come back to it at some point. But another way to kind of make sense of it being your choice is to say that at the time that you make the choice, you're responsive to reasons, including reasons to act otherwise than you actually act. So one way, I mean, even if you don't think that this is central to explaining our freedom, one really interesting and important feature of our moral agency, of our capacity for deliberation about what to do, practical reasoning, is that we can think about reasons for acting one way and reasons for acting another. We can think about those, and then we can translate those reasons for acting into robust actions. So when I decided to make coffee this morning rather than skip coffee or do something else instead, right? I was sensitive to the fact that by making coffee, I could, enjoy one of my favorite beverages, that I could get the caffeine. Like, I was sensitive to all those reasons at the time of making the choice. And well, it seems like I freely made the coffee this morning. And that seems like it's compatible with those those very actions, like the decision to make the coffee and the actual brewing of the coffee and all that, being guaranteed by the say initial conditions of the universe and the laws. So as long as I'm sort of sensitive to reasons, if there had been some reason not to make the coffee, like I realized that this would cause some harm to someone else in some way, then I wouldn't have done it. If that kind of thing is true of me, it seems like, well, I'm sensitive to reasons at the time, and it seems like it's genuinely my choice.
What does
Maybe
that
it's worth. Yeah,
what does
go
that
ahead.
mean to be sensitive to reason? So like a lion is hungry and it sees a gazelle. Is it sensitive to reasons, or how is that different from humans being sensitive to reasons?
Right. Yeah, I don't know enough about what's going on in the brain of the lion, but compare like a human who makes the normal choice, like mine, to brew the coffee, and a human who um, maybe compulsively or as the result of an addiction performs some action, maybe taking some drug. If the addiction is really, really strong, then it might be the case that the person takes a drug um, and is insensitive to reasons at the time. Like, they take the drug regardless of whether it caused suffering to themselves or others. To be sensitive to reasons is to be able to recognize reasons for and against various courses of action, and then to be able to sort of translate that into action. Right, seeing that something is a good reason not to perform an action, and then not doing it right on the basis of those reasons.
Is there a
So
difference
I
between
yeah.
addiction and say simply desire? So like a psychopath or sociopath doesn't feel empathy, so they have no desire to be compassionate to another human being, but they can recognize the reasons. Are they any different from the person who's an addict?
A very good question. I think that'll depend on your view of motivation, like what's actually motivating behavior, and that in its connection to what we might call reason or rationality, seeing the reasons for and against various courses of action. Um, I guess if it's impossible to go from the step of having a reason, like recognizing the reason for avoiding a certain course of action. If you can't go from that to being motivated by the reason, it looks like that's a case of insensitivity to reasons. So it depends, and I think it's pretty clear that this will come in degrees, and with real life addicts in particular, this is definitely going to come in degrees. Someone could be more or less sensitive to reasons, but in the really extreme case where like the person's going to take the drug even if like they see that it's going to ruin their life or result in someone's death or something like that, and they take it anyway, they just can't help it. That looks like a case where they're not exhibiting reason sensitivity.
So, like, one of the things that comes to mind is the studies in neurology that show that people who lose their ability to have emotions also lose their ability to do make decisions about math or any kind of determined rationality.
Hmm.
And so it seems like our ability to be receptive to reasons is determined by our ability to have emotional responses to those reasons in some way. And so that seems no different from essentially the psychopath in that way, in that their emotional response to the action of being empathetic or not, since it's there or not there, is what causes them to be receptive to the reasons. And so, in a similar way, it seems for all of our decisions, our ability to be receptive to the reason is if that reason can affect our emotions in some way. And without emotions, we have no ability to do that at all. So, would that view undermine the definition of free will that you gave, where our receptiveness to reasons is what gives us free will?
Yeah, maybe it wouldn't undermine it. It would at least show that it needs to be supplemented. And I think that seems right. Like it seems like you need to have this component where there's the rational or theoretical component, and then there's the component about putting that into action. Maybe it has to do with desire or other or motivation. Um, but yeah, I think you're latching on to the basic idea that these people who appeal to reason sensitivity are after, which is just that, like, yeah, it really matters um, for determining whether it's your choice, um, whether you could have understood reasons to do otherwise at that time, and whether you could have been motivated to act otherwise. If you're really acting compulsively, whether as a psychopath in your sense or the extreme addict, then most people, even compatibilists, will want to say, yeah, that is going to take away freedom and responsibility. So the important difference between the extreme addict case and a typical agent, even in a deterministic world, has to do with their responsiveness to reasons at that time.
So why is responsiveness to reasons important here as opposed to responsiveness to any other thing? So let's say gravity or rocks are responsive to gravity or whatever. Why not call that free will? And how is
Yeah,
responsiveness to reasons any different?
right. Well, this is connected up with what you initially asked about, which is moral agency. It's been pretty common especially in the history of moral philosophy, to say what's special about um, uh, maybe human agents, or at least rational human agents, is their capacity for practical reason, and so sensitivity to reasons and guiding our conduct in accordance with our reasons. Um, that is just what it is to be a moral agent, and so unsurprisingly, that's going to be part of the sort of necessary conditions for responsibility, for being accountable for what we do, right? A rock, yeah, is sort of sensitive to gravity in that it falls, but it's not the kind of thing that guides its behavior. It doesn't even have behavior really in accordance with reason, and so isn't the sort of thing that's morally appraisable in the first place. I think it's intuitive that, like, if moral agency involves practical reasoning about what to do, and that reflects on us as moral agents, then yeah, thinking of free will in terms of responsiveness to reasons, being able to practically reason, yeah, so that's sort of a natural fit.
Well, I mean, if we take the reasons to the extreme and say there's like a computer or something that's 100% determined by the reasons. You give it a reason, and if it's a good
Hmm.
reason or the best reason, it's going to do the thing, and it has no ability to choose something other than the reasons. Would that thing still qualify as having free will in the same sense?
Hmm. It this is sort of a I hope this doesn't seem as like a cop out, but this is a typical philosopher's answer, which is just that it depends on the details of the case. I'm not I'm not totally sure what I think about whether you could have a computer or even an artificial intelligence that comes to be conscious of moral reasons in the way that humans definitely are. I go back and forth on that. But suppose that you do have a computer that's so sophisticated, or an operating system or AI that's so sophisticated that it's basically mimicking human cognition, just with different, well, hardware, I guess, for lack of a better word, right? It's silicon and bits, and not a carbon-based brain. If it's doing the same things that we're doing when we reason, and um, can understand what it's doing and what alternatives would amount to and reasons for doing what it's doing, then I guess as a compatibilist, I tend to think, yeah, it's at least in principle possible you could have a morally responsible computer or AI.
Let's go with your example of the guy who, the evil doctor, inserted a chip into his brain when
Yeah.
he's about to vote. Let's say the doctor programmed the chip to say that the guy is determined by reasons and that any reason, as long as it's logical, if it's the better reason, he's going to necessarily choose whichever candidate or
Hmm.
whatever. Like this person has better a track record or whatever. And
Hmm.
so in that case, does the guy in the voting booth still have free will, or does he lack free will because his action is determined by the computer chip?
Yeah, great question. I guess most people will want to say if the guy if it, well I don't know if it's a guy, if it's, let's suppose this nefarious neuroscientist is a guy, he's this classic comic book
It's
villain,
Bill Gates. It's Bill Gates. He inserts
or
little
it's Bill
computer
Gates,
chips.
yeah. Okay, so yeah, if he's like, if he's inserting a chip that uh, programs the victim to reason in a way they wouldn't have reasoned otherwise, if the reason that they act as they do is because they couldn't have done otherwise, thanks to this, this chip that changed the way they would have acted. Most of us, myself included, will want to say that person's not, at least not fully morally responsible. So the difference in the from that between that case and the original case is, in the original case, even though the chip was inserted and yeah, that was probably wrong for a lot of different reasons, the chip never interrupted the person's uh, it didn't sort of bypass their capacities to deliberate or reason about what to do, and it didn't like make them reason differently or anything like that. Um, there's a chip in their brain, but it didn't really affect how anything played out in that actual causal sequence that led to their behavior. But in your case, it sounds like no, it is interrupting and making them act differently or something like that. Um, I guess we could consider a variant where the chip determines them to act in a particular way. It's active and making them act in a particular way, but according to reasons. Like we make sure that they're sensitive to reasons and all that. It turns out that is actually a variation of the second main argument against compatibilism, the manipulation argument that I kind of set aside earlier. So you're kind of latching on to the other main challenge to compatibilism here, and compatibilists disagree about what to say about that kind of case. I guess um, some think if you're manipulated or somehow set up to act in a particular way by another agent, that's enough to take away freedom and responsibility. They just think the ordinary causally deterministic worlds that aren't set up by Bill Gates or anyone else, God or anyone else, those ones are the ones that are fine for free will. So they're compatibilists, but they think if someone set it up or someone did the manipulating, that would undermine freedom. Some of us think, I tend more to be in this latter camp, think that as long as the victim um, satisfies certain conditions, right, the typical conditions for acting freely, being morally responsible, it doesn't matter whether the um, whether their capacities, whatever it is that satisfies those conditions for freedom, it doesn't matter whether they were implanted, set up by someone else, or anything like that. It just matters whether they have those capacities at the time.
What
So
are
we're,
those
we're tend
conditions?
well, again, it depends on the view. One is the reasons responsiveness stuff that we were just talking about, so sensitivity to reasons. Maybe I should just mention one of the main alternatives that actually Harry Frankfurt himself has defended is that it's not so much sensitivity reasons, but it's that you're doing what you want to be doing at a sort of higher order level. So there's a kind of mesh between what you desire to do and what you desire to do. And as long as you're doing what you really want to do in this sense that you're identifying with the springs of your action, then you count as doing it freely. So that's an even easier thing for a Bill Gates type figure to insert into someone's brain to make them want to do the thing that they end up doing. Um, but on some compatibilist views, like Frankfurt's, that's totally fine. Manipulation is not really a problem because it doesn't really take away freedom.
So, like in the case of, I create a person, essentially like a god or whatever, instead of a robot. If I create a person and I give them the desire to worship me and to obey everything I want them to do they have free will?
Yeah, on this view, yes, and even on the reasons responsive view, if you sort of set them up from the get-go to develop into a reasons responsive agent, and you just knew that by putting them in these conditions with this kind of starting environment or whatever, um, they'll develop into this agent who sees reasons for worship, then yeah, it kind of reminds me of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. 'Cause you kind of get some of this in um, you know, the monster's response to having been created by the doctor. Like, you should have maybe thought about how you created me, given that you're making me this conscious being. Maybe you had certain obligations to me. It sounds like that's some of what's going on in the background. In the debate about the manipulation argument that's really taken off in the last 20 years or so in the philosophy of free will, one of the main cases involves a goddess, Diana, who wants some event to happen 30 years down the line. And so the way that she decides to bring it about is by creating this zygote and implanting it in a person, Mary. And Diana knows that by creating the zygote in exactly this way, implanting it in Mary, the zygote will develop into Ernie, this ordinary human agent who 30 years later will perform the action that will bring about the event that she wants. Um, the person who introduced that, the philosopher Al Mealy, thinks this is a pretty tough challenge for compatibilism. He's officially agnostic about whether he thinks he's a compatibilist or a libertarian. And it's this kind of case that worries him. Like, it seems like compatibilists have to say that Ernie is free and doing the thing that he was set up to do. But it really seems like he's not free. He's really Diana's tool or something like this, something that takes away his freedom. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so,
I agree. I don't
yeah.
see a substantive difference between essentially programming a robot to knock over a table cup and programming a robot to want to knock over a table cup and then it doing it. I don't
Mhm.
see any difference between those two as it's just an extra domino essentially in the step. Like why would adding an extra domino be called free will? If it's one domino or two dominoes, they're still dominoes.
Mhm. Yeah. I guess, yeah, putting it that way, like, it can really seem like it just seems like you're, uh, yeah, making a more sophisticated chain of dominoes or something like that, and um, not it's like a difference in quantity of steps rather than something that's qualitatively different that could give rise to free will and robust control and all that. But I guess I'm of the view that, and we can see this by comparing certain human agents. I just think freedom and responsibility are the sorts of things that emerge when agents like us develop certain capacities for deliberation about what we do and sensitivity to reasons and all that. So, like, I have a couple of young kids, and I'm skeptical whether either of them's really free or responsible yet. But my older one's like on his way, and he can start to see reasons for and against certain actions.
This is where you say he's 30, right?
That's right. His name's Ernie. My name's Diana. No. Yeah. So he's only 4 right now. So he's a pretty smart 4-year-old, and he can communicate pretty clearly about reasons for and against some actions. At the same time, I wonder though, how much of that is him uh, really understanding especially the moral significance of various courses of action. But in any case, compare my 1-year-old with like myself in my 30s. Uh, Very clearly, one of us has certain capacities when we, knock over something, or when we, say something. Uh, we have different ways of thinking about our behavior that I think it means something morally significant. Like, when I knock something over intentionally, maybe out of spite, like, that reflects something about me and something about um, what I care about, and um, my attitudes towards, say, the person I intended to slight by knocking this over. Whereas when my daughter does it, even if she means to knock the thing over, like, she's not really expressing hostility, or like, she doesn't have this, it doesn't reflect on her in the same way that it does on me. So if you look at agents like that, and maybe you could compare like 2 adult agents, one who is compulsive and one who isn't, or that sort of thing, it starts to look like the things we care about when we hold each other responsible, when we praise people, when we blame people, they are the sort of thing that emerge when you get um, capacity for reflective choice, right? Whatever that involves, sensitivity to reasons, or the right mesh between your, higher order desires and the desires that lead you to act. So it does kind of seem like, on one way of describing things, it is just an extra domino in the sequence. but I think it's just the right sort of domino to give rise to something new that you couldn't have if it's just a bunch of stuff bumping into each other like an actual series of dominoes.
Well, why couldn't you have it with just the dominoes? Like, what is substantively the difference between like a free will person who's determined by the reasons and a P zombie who says they are, but they just don't have a consciousness? They're still going to act the same way.
Right. Yeah. I guess I'm just committed. Well, I mean, if you know that the person is yeah, P zombie, someone they're not really conscious, they're not um even though it looks like they're thinking about what to do and acting in accordance with their reasons, even though it looks for all the world like that, if you grant and you know this that they're not doing those things, like, it's hard to not think of them as just a rock or something that isn't really making choices, even though they're acting as if they are making choices. And so, like, if you were to find out that, or yeah, suppose I found out that like uh my spouse is a pea zombie, right? Like that would drastically change the nature of our relationship. And I think I would just stop praising and blaming my spouse if I were to find out she was a pea zombie. Um, Whereas if you know that I mean, this gets into the problem of other minds and knowing whether anyone else is a P zombie, but like we take it for granted that the people we're in relationships with do have conscious experiences like our own. We think about them a lot differently than we would with the P zombie, and we think it has to do with the way that they. Um, well, different philosophers will differ on the details here, but I think it'll have something substantively to do with what they care about and what kind of goodwill or ill will they're showing in their conduct. Those are things that P zombies just lack insofar as conscious experience is necessary for that valuing things and expressing that value in action.
Well, and my question would be is when I present a reason to you or to anybody, what seems to happen is that your brain converts the sounds into certain neuron connections that are associated with certain emotions, and those connections then bring up the meanings and images of the words and the reason and things. But it seems like even without the conscious recognition of what the words mean, the subconscious mind still does all the processing and all the emotional stuff, and so it can still be responsive to the reasons without having any consciousness at all. So you can have a P zombie who, when you present a reason to them, their brain is determined to fire in such a way that they're responsive to that reason. Like if you said, this
Mhm.
candidate will save you more money or whatever, even though they don't have any conscious recognition of that reason, their subconscious brain still fires in such a way that it will determine them to act on that reason. So would they still have free will in that case?
Right. I'd still say no. That case is still more like the rock who's, sensitive to some input and obeying gravity, but not even though the brain's still doing the same sort of things. Right? I mean, we're having to sort of bracket here the possibility, like the idea that maybe this is not possible. I mean, I tend to think that um, P zombies are possible. This is getting into issues in philosophy of mind, though, that maybe we kind of want to sidestep. But just take that for granted. I mean, if they're not really consciously processing the reason, um, it's hard to see how they're directly responsible for acting either, yeah, in accordance with it or what have you. Now, maybe it's worth making a quick clarification here. If it's true that a lot of the times you and I, when we're given reasons as inputs, process them, but not at the level of consciousness, or it's not like apparent to us at the moment that we're doing it. Um, you might think, well, we're not responsible, just like I said, the P zombie isn't, but I think it will depend on what we've done in the past. That philosophers sometimes talk about direct freedom and indirect freedom, and I think it's plausible that direct freedom requires kind of conscious recognition of what you're doing and why.
What's the difference
But
between direct and indirect freedom?
yeah, indirect freedom would be like you count as doing something freely, but not because you're sort of in control or conscious at that time, but because you were at some earlier time or with respect to some earlier reasons, and that led to the later thing. So I'll come back to the conscious reasons thing in a minute, but a really simple case of indirect freedom would be um, consider someone who freely uh, decides to. get drunk and not take, care to give someone their keys or prepare to get an Uber or something like that. They're preparing to drive after they've become very inebriated and they won't have sufficient control of their vehicle. So now imagine this person who's freely taken this risk gets behind the wheel when they're so drunk that they can't respond to stimuli in enough time to avoid hitting a pedestrian. Right? I think a lot of people would want to say they're not in control of their vehicle at that later time. They don't freely um, hit the pedestrian at that time. They don't really want to be doing it. They couldn't have done otherwise, in at least one sense of that term, because of their drunken state. But it also seems plausible that if they freely took that risk, that they're at least indirectly responsible and maybe indirectly free in driving the car and hitting the pedestrian. We can hold them accountable for that, given the earlier action that they did directly freely, namely getting drunk and taking the risk. So it's harder to see exactly how that'll apply in the case of uh, conscious reasoning. But like, suppose that I have formed the habit of maybe given the value of my relationship with my kids, of like, spending time with my kid when that's an opportunity. It might be that I'm given an opportunity and so a reason to spend some time with my kids, and then I don't consciously deliberate about whether to do it. It just sort of happens at the level of the subconscious or something like this. As long as I freely made that way of thinking about things and that formed that value, as long as I did all of that freely, then maybe even when I'm um, not at the level of consciousness but kind of subconsciously processing reasons, I could still count as indirectly free. And that would never apply to the P zombie, because there wouldn't be any earlier stuff that they did consciously and freely.
Well, yeah, that's the question though. Is the question is talking about the initial free choice. If that initial free choice is simply caused by subconscious desires, then you would no longer classify as having free will in that case, right?
Yeah, that's right. Actually, this is something that gripped my attention early in grad school and I've been working on ever since. It seems like we can learn a lot about free will by looking at how it develops and like those first free actions, if there are any first free actions that we perform. Because yeah, if you're especially if you're, tempted to compatibilism, right? You think that we began to exist and at some point we started performing free actions. Where did that come from? Especially if it was like, yeah, at every moment it was settled by the moment before it and the laws that you would make that choice. Um, yeah, so it's a really big issue, like how free will gets off the ground. I will mention, I think this is a problem for anyone who thinks that we're free and responsible, because even if you're an incompatibilist who thinks we have free will, so a libertarian, like you think there is a first free action, right? The only difference is you might require that when we perform our first free actions, we weren't determined. Maybe you think that's we could have done otherwise, or like to be the source of our actions at that time, it had to be indeterministically brought about or caused. Um, Still, the kinds of reasons that occur to you, um, what your values are, supposing this happens sometime during childhood, right? All of that stuff is outside of your control and given to you. So it looks like you still have a lot of the same issues that the challenges as the compatibilist has. I'm still trying to work out the details of my solution to this, but the proposal that I've sketched is it relies heavily on the idea that freedom and responsibility come in degrees, and I think this actually makes it less less extreme to say that we are responsible even in childhood for some first free action. So what do I mean by degrees? I think it's very clear that we sometimes blame people to different degrees. Right? Like think of like two people who perform similar actions, but one was under a lot of stress, or um, they're feeling extra pressure that the other one wasn't. We might blame one of those agents more than another. Um, it's not implausible, I think, that it's not just that we in fact do blame people to different degrees, but that people are genuinely worthy of blame to different degrees, depending on how much control they had over their action or how much they were aware of the significance of what they were doing. And I think it's plausible to tell this story with young kids and how freedom and responsibility get off the ground, that the beginning of their lives, they don't have enough control or knowledge, maybe any control or knowledge over what they're doing, to be even in the ballpark of being responsible for it. But as their capacities, like their understanding of uh, the consequences of their action, how what they're doing is going to affect others, as their impulse control and as their understanding of morality develop, all those things come in degrees. I think you get to a point where they start to be a little bit responsible, but not a whole lot. So um,
I'm not quite following there. How does that answer the question? Like the initial free decision, whether it's you just immediately get 100% free, or if it's like a partial. How does that answer the question of how an action is initially free if it's predetermined by prior causes? Because it doesn't seem to make a difference whether we get a little bit of freedom or we get the whole thing in one instance.
yeah,
Either way, it seems as long as it's still predetermined by like subconscious states, then it would be equally as not free.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, if that line of argument is compelling to you, then probably nothing I say will kind of move you from that position. I think that really is the ultimate sort of skeptical alternative to the pro free will position. I guess the reason I think that degrees helps here, though, is it can seem pretty extreme. Like it might even seem like you're biting a theoretical bullet to say at 4 years old, you're not free or responsible at all. At 5, or even at 9, or even at 18, you all of a sudden go from not responsible at all to, you're liable to all the same blame and punishment as any other adult. Like, it seems weird that responsibility would just pop into existence like that along that continuum. But if you think it comes in degrees, and so you can be, blameworthy or praiseworthy to a very small degree, it seems like not so much a bullet to bite to say, once you have certain capacities that are relevant to moral agency, even in this small, early stages, like you start to have some impulse control, you start to understand morality. I think it's not so implausible that it is the sort of thing that emerges once those capacities are there in a small degree. So it's a way of sort of explaining why it's not such a bullet to bite to say we go from not responsible to responsible. It's a very slight thing. It's not a jumping into the deep end sort of thing. But I do take your point. Like if you think no to have responsibility at all, like even in a small degree, come into existence, you've got to have control over what's bringing about those actions, and so determinism precludes freedom and responsibility. Then this won't fully satisfy you.
Well,
I
wasn't
guess.
that your argument earlier? Was that it doesn't matter if your secondary decision was a result of prior free decisions, because as long as you made the prior free decisions, those future determined ones are still technically free in some sense. But if we take that to the case of the initial free decision, even if it's in a degree, if that initial free decision wasn't a result of some prior free decision and was a result
Mhm.
of some determined decision, wouldn't, by your definition, mean that wasn't free?
Oh, I see. Yeah, you're right. If I think that for all of our actions, they're only free indirectly, then I'd have a problem. I need some direct free actions for responsibility to get off the ground. Um, so yeah, this is a good clarification. I don't think that all of our actions are merely indirectly free. I do think we are directly free, and not just even early in our lives, but throughout our lives. The point about indirect freedom was there can be times, even when we're full grown adults, where we do something freely, but only in virtue of earlier free, directly free actions. So I just think that can happen, but I think maybe even my decision to make coffee this morning was directly free. It didn't trace back to anything earlier. Um, so yeah, it is really important that that the view explain how actions can count as directly free, and part of explaining how responsibility gets off the ground in childhood. I think it's in childhood. I don't know the exact age, but that's when the relevant capacities get off the ground. So I think that's when freedom and responsibility get off the ground.
I think
Um,
25 is a good age for that.
25. Yeah, definitely by 25. I had made a lot of big life decisions by 25, so I'd be a lot less free than I thought if that's the cutoff. But yeah.
So
Anyway, I just think once you see that those things come in degrees, you can start to see how direct freedom could get off the ground, um, without sort of having to trace back to earlier things.
So how does it coming in degrees lead to direct freedom?
Right. So the thing that comes in degrees is, freedom or responsibility. Um, um, because the sort of capacity is relevant to, being in control of our actions such that we're, responsible for them. Because those things come in degrees, it seems like a natural view that, the degree to which you had control over your action, or the degree to which you understood what you were doing, the significance of your action, sort of directly corresponds to how, morally responsible you are for it. Now, that's just what I mean by direct freedom and responsibility is, being free and responsible to any degree, for that action and not in virtue of something earlier. Indirect freedom is when you didn't have control or you didn't have the right kind of knowledge of what you were doing, and yet you still count as free, but only because of something earlier that you did. So the conditions on freedom and responsibility at a time are the conditions for direct, freedom.
Okay, and so to go from no freedom to direct freedom, you're just saying the natural brain development and ability to assess reasons evolves that essentially.
hmm Yeah, and I mean, you could substitute if you're a compatibilist who thinks different things are relevant for responsibility. Whatever you think is relevant, whatever those capacities are, when those develop, that's when, freedom and responsibility comes into being.
And how
Yeah.
like
So
does go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the pushback I'm sensing in some of your questions is, and it's, friendly pushback, but I appreciate it. But, I tend to it seems like a lot of skeptics about freedom and responsibility tend to think, well, if you're really in control of what you're doing, you had to be in control of whatever led to what you were doing, or something like that. Like, it seems like control at the time is not enough. You had to have control over, um, the way you were deliberating, or the values that you had before you were deliberating, or something like that. If that's all given, right, whether it's by sort of natural deterministic causes or by some other manipulator type agent, then it seems like you're not free. And, I take that skeptical challenge to free will very seriously. I mean, for me, that's like the biggest threat to freedom, is this idea that it's sort of outside of our control, um, what we're like when we act, and so it seems like how we act isn't in our control either. This is where, the debate about free will intersects with another big debate in philosophy called the debate about moral luck. And so the issues are kind of the same. This is sometimes called constitutive luck, when how you're constituted, like, what you believe or desire, or how you're motivated to act, what you value, all of those things, if they're outside of your control, they're a matter of luck for you. You're constitutively lucky at that time. It seems like you're not in control of how you act from that constitution. And that's, I think, a big challenge. I mean, I've written a couple papers on this, and I spent a bunch of my dissertation kind of grappling with this skeptical challenge to free will. At the end of the day, I just think this is really at the end of it. I'm zooming out quite a bit, but like, when you're looking at the skeptical position and a pro free will position, or even just compatibilism in particular, I think you can't just look at one issue. You've got to look at how these two competing models explain or don't explain all the things that we care about, a view of free will or lack of free will explaining. And I think there are challenges for the skeptic. This is one of the big challenges for the pro free will position. And I try to say as much as I can to mitigate the sort of, bite of the challenge, right? To make it seem like I'm not biting as big a bullet as it might seem at first. But I do think it is sort of like, it highlights a cost of thinking that we have free will, is you have to say that in order for responsibility to get off the ground, uh, you can be free and responsible even when entirely constitutively lucky. And if that's just like, if that's too far and you're okay with saying, yeah, no one's ever praiseworthy or blameworthy, or anything that depends on that is out the window too, and that seems better, then I can see why you'd have that view. I just think in terms of total costs and benefits, This one gets outweighed. This cost, the rest of the compatibilist explanatory power can make it so that this isn't such a bad thing.
You mentioned that there were challenges towards the skeptics' view. What would be some of those?
Well, this is where it'll depend on some of your other kind of broader philosophical and, in some cases, theological, religious commitments. You know, if you're in a religious tradition where God holds you accountable for how you act, you're probably going to think we are accountable. God's not just blaming us when we're not blameworthy and that sort of thing, or praising us when we're not really praiseworthy.
Unless you're a
Um,
Calvinist, then it's fine. Everything's determined by
well, even
God.
if you're the Calvinist, you got to think that people are really blameworthy, deserve to be damned, and that sort of thing. So, uh, yeah, there could be those broader reasons to favor a pro free will position. For one that's not theological or that doesn't depend on any particular religious commitments, I do think it would require quite a revision to our ordinary way of interacting with each other if we were to think people aren't really ever deserving of praise and blame. This might vary from person to person to some extent, but like the feeling of resentment when someone that you're close to wrongs you, even just feeling angry about what they do, um, feeling of indignation when a political leader says something horrible or makes a bad choice, or you name it. Anytime that you get upset and blame someone for what you take to be acting wrongly, right? It looks like there's something that's gone wrong if they didn't ever really deserve blame for what they did. Um, you might think the appropriate emotion, if they're not really blameworthy, is not going to be resentment or indignation, but a kind of regret or sadness, like wishing that that hadn't happened, but not a sort of an attitude towards them that says, like, oh, they should have known better, they should have acted differently. If you think it wasn't really up to them, you have to think, well, it's unfortunate, but that's just the way that they are, or the way their circumstances were. Um, and I do think there probably are people who already are more inclined to think of their relationships that way, or to think about, criticizing, third parties, like, criticizing a politician or something like that in exactly those ways. But I do think it's pretty common. Maybe it's way more common than not to engage in these, as they're sometimes called, reactive attitudes, these attitudes of praise and blame that presuppose that people really are responsible for what they do. So I, I don't know how much to really kind of how much weight to give to this point, but I do think here's one potential cost for the skeptic is that insofar as we're committed to practices, our relationships depend on practices that presuppose that that the people we interact with are praiseworthy and blameworthy. Giving that up would be a cost.
So, from my perspective, it seems like there's the argument Sam Harris makes that if we could give everyone a pill and make them no longer murderers or whatever, then
Hmm.
there'd no longer be a justification for seeing them as blameworthy. Like they were under some neurological condition that made them a murderer. And
Hmm.
once we gave them the pill, they're no longer a murderer. Um, if that seemed to be the case, if we could actually do that, where we could simply just change a brain state and solve any desire to commit a crime, wouldn't that indicate that the correct way to view the situation is, that I'm sad that that happened. I'm sad that they had that brain state, but it wasn't really their choice. And this seems like something that's going to be a possible in the future where we can't just change a brain state and be like, okay, you no longer have the desire for murder. Wouldn't that undermine the position that this argument proposes that we have this loss? And really, that's just the way we should be viewing it because it seems empirically that's the way it is. Oh, I think you lost connection. Weird. Refresh the page. Refresh the page. Pull up my email. Mm. 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 Let it. Oh, there we go. That worked. I'm going to refresh the page. All right, I can see you now. Everything's clear.
Okay. I don't know what happened.
I mean, neither. Right? That's never happened before.
Oh, weird.
All right.
Are we still streaming as normal?
Yes. Yeah. I like
Okay.
after shows and things, so people can chat there even if nothing's
Okay.
going on. So, yes,
Okay.
we are on air. Do you
Well, I
remember
heard all of your question, and then as soon as you stopped and let me answer, on my end, it just looked like something the call ended or something. I'm sorry.
Skynet? Skynet was like, no, you don't get to demolish my free will. And just ended the
That's
conversation.
right. Or it was Diana. She's always in the background.
Yep. Yep.
um, so yeah, I do think if you're thinking that the right response to this scenario where we find out we could just give people a drug and curb certain kinds of behaviors, certain criminal behaviors, what that shows is that they were never really free all along. They were sort of determined by whatever was going on in their brain or something like that. Um, I do think if that's right, you do have to say the right attitude to have towards people is one that's not doesn't involve thinking of them as deserving of blame or praise. I guess my thought is um, I wouldn't want to go from, even if this were possible, I wouldn't want to go from thinking that just learning that we could curb certain behaviors with certain drugs. I wouldn't go from that to thinking that people were never responsible. Um, Even when when something was going on in their brain that we could change. In fact, I would think of that the drug case, again, depends on the details of how you describe the case, but it seems like a kind of variant of the chip in the brain sort of scenario or a manipulation scenario, which may or may not be justified. Especially, imagine kind of a criminal offender who does some especially heinous crime, and you want to, make sure that they don't do that again when they're, um, out of prison. It might have good reason. This is something that actually is current and evolving debate, because there are some correctives, neurocorrectives, some drugs that are used even in some cases to do exactly this. So it does seem like it raises the same questions as the kind of manipulation cases we were talking about earlier. Just they're less science fictional and more practical. Um, if you think that, without that um, intervention, without that drug, people are still sensitive to reasons, or they can do what they really want to be doing, or whatever you think is, relevantly connected to freedom and responsibility. Um, the fact that we could give them that drug and make them do something else instead, or at least take certain options away from them, I wouldn't think that that would bear on whether they're responsible now. It does raise the interesting question of whether they'd be responsible with the drug. And if you're like me and you think, well, little agents, those, youngins that first do their their first morally responsible actions, they can be free. I would want to say, as long as they have certain capacities, even with the drug, even if certain things are sort of now not desired at all by them, they could still reasonably choose to do what they do and be reasons responsive and all that. I would want to say they could still be free even with the drug, depending on the details of the case.
That's an interesting perspective. So,
Mhm.
for example, one of the arguments of the theists is that God needed to allow suffering because he needed to give everyone free will or whatever. But
Mhm.
given that definition of free will, it seems like he could give us free will and have us never desire to kill anyone ever,
Yeah.
and those would not be incompatible.
Right. I think this is probably one reason why a lot of theists tend to be incompatibilists. They tend to think, if freedom were compatible with God doing that, or with determinism, then well, he would, he would, design us very differently and determine us very differently. Um, I myself am a theist and a compatibilist, so I'm sort of an outlier here. Um, I just think you're going to have to say something else in response to the problem of evil, right? I think um, I do think free will is valuable, and I do think that God's given us free will, but that doesn't explain by itself why there's suffering. That I mean, if God couldn't help but allow the possibility of suffering, then maybe an appeal of free will might be part of the story about why there's evil. But if you're compatible, it's a little harder to see. I will say there is one relatively recent paper, it's within the last 10 years, trying to give a kind of compatibilist free will defense, not quite a full theodicy, but trying to say how, like I mentioned earlier, that some compatibilists think that if um, if you're determined to do what you do because of some other agent, like a manipulator or something like this could take away your freedom. But in an ordinary causally deterministic scenario, that's not what happens. If that's your view and you think God exists, then you might think, well, even though we can be determined in the sort of natural way by natural forces and still be free, if God did it with the intention that we perform, particular actions, because he's another agent, he would be like a manipulator in that case, that would take away our freedom. So there have been some moves recently to try to say how you could appeal to free will as part of, your defense against the problem of evil, even as a compatibilist. But as I said, that's not my view in response to the worry about manipulation, so I can't quite go there. I'd have to say something else.
Is there a substantive difference between an agent doing the manipulation versus just nature doing the manipulation, and why would there be a difference between those two things? Like, say, evil scientists put a chip in your brain versus biology programming your brain exactly like the chip
Yep.
would. What is substantively the difference between those two?
Um, on my view, none. There is no substantive difference. But on these compatibilists who think manipulation undermines freedom and responsibility, on their view, there has to be some difference. Um, some of the compatibilists who have kind of put this line forward haven't been totally clear on what the relevant difference is between those cases. But there have been some recent proposals that are very specific and pretty well worked out. One that I'm thinking of is by Oshin Deary and Eddie Namias. If people are really interested in a deep dive here, you can go check out this paper. I think it's from 2017. It's in the journal called Philosophical Studies. Um, I'm blanking on the title of the paper, but it's something like about compatibilist sourcehood and manipulation arguments. If you just did a search for those names, Deary and Namias on Google Scholar, you'd probably find it. Anyway, their view is that to be the right kind of source of your action, so we talked a little bit about sourcehood earlier, it has to be the case that you're the most robust source of the action and that no other thing or being is. And so here, the idea is something like if you're determined to vote for candidate A thanks to natural forces, you're just causally determined, but there's no divinity or manipulator involved. You count as the most robust source on their view. The view is very detailed and specific. It gets into the nature of causation and a particular model of causation, but I'll set that aside. In a case where um, Diana sets you up to vote for candidate A, or Bill Gates intervenes right before you go in the voting booth, or what have you, um, it turns out that you aren't the most robust source of that action, according to their model. This other being, the divinity, Diana or Bill Gates, is. So there, the relevant difference is supposed to be that you're only the most robust source of your action when someone else isn't making you do it. But when someone else is making you do it, they're the one who's the most robust source.
Why isn't nature considered a robust source?
Yeah, this does take us into the weeds some, but the idea is something like with natural forces, with just nature, you don't have an intentional agent who's like responding to what you do in the same way that like this goddess or Bill Gates is supposed to be. So like if Bill Gates, it gets very complicated actually, but you have to look at various counterfactual scenarios. These like alternative ways things could happen but don't in fact happen. And on if I'm determined by natural forces to vote for candidate A, um, it might be that in like some nearby but non-actual possible worlds, these counterfactual scenarios, I don't vote for candidate A. Maybe I just think differently about it or something like this. But nothing in those scenarios would, because this is we're just talking about nature, nothing would sort of intervene to make me go ahead and vote for candidate A. But if it's Diana or Bill Gates, you have this intentional agent who's going to make sure that you do the thing they want you to do. And so in all these sort of nearby but counterfactual possible scenarios, you're still doing the thing in question, but because of their activity. So, um,
I don't see the
I
difference there. Like, because if
yeah,
there's a possible world where a law would you would choose a different thing because the law would change your action, then there should also be a possible world where Diana has different desires, and so she would make you choose a different action. So I see there'd be like a one-to-one correlation in possible worlds of nature determining you to do things and different possible Dianas determining you to do things.
yeah. I mean, I guess if you're right and there is that kind of one to one correlation, that would be a problem for the model. But um, the people who propose this kind of idea tend to think if Diana or Bill Gates has this goal and we're holding that fixed, there's nothing kind of parallel to that in the past or the laws, what we're calling nature, that would substantively and like in a wide range of these counterfactual scenarios impact what you do. Um, Let me just say this that gets really into the weeds, and um, I am working on something on this right now. I'm not convinced. I think uh, your
Skepticism.
skepticism that there's going to be a relevant difference between the natural force case and an agent. Um, so there are people who think that way, and like I said, there's that one paper. Oh, I didn't mention the title of that one. I think it's just called Compatibilism and the Free Will Defense or something like that. It's by a guy named Turner. Um, there are people who try to go that route, but yeah, I'm skeptical that that's ultimately going to work. I
Yeah,
think
because
you can always have, yeah.
I use the same argument against the fine tuning because it seems like if we look at the constants of nature and claim that they're fine tuned, you can make a one-to-one correlation that God is fine tuned because for every possible universe, there's a possible God who wanted that universe. So I don't. That's why I
Interesting.
think
Yeah.
it's similar in the case that for any kind of delineation between the way an agent could be and the universe could be, there must necessarily be a one-to-one because the agent could just want it to be that way, or nature could determine it to be that conscious state or whatever. And so either way, there has to be a one-to-one. I don't see how there couldn't
Hmm.
be. Um,
Yeah.
so what is your view on uh, indeterminacy, randomness affecting conscious decisions, and how does that affect free will?
Um, I've given less thought to this, I guess, because I'm a compatibilist. Like the main things I have to tackle are the challenges to believing that free will and determinism are compatible. But I'm not a determinist in that I'm not the kind of person who thinks you have to be determined in order to be free. So I guess I'm at least open in principle to the possibility that um, we do in fact bring about our actions in just the way that libertarians think is required for free will. So I don't think that adding indeterminacy uh, like would undermine freedom and responsibility. I used to think maybe that maybe I we do need determinism. I used to think this problem of randomness or chance or luck is a big problem for libertarianism, but I've backed off on that a bit because I don't want to require determinacy. And I think as long as you've already got a story about how we're responsible, even in a deterministic setting, as long as you can have the same kind of cross temporal explanations of behavior in terms of the agent's reasons, even if like things could have happened differently because it was indeterministic. I think as long as you're doing what you want to do, you're sensitive to reasons and all that, that seems compatible with in an indeterministic context. So I think you could still be free and responsible.
So, like, if one of your decisions was a result of a random quantum fluctuation, and so you weren't receptive to reasons in that case, that would undermine your free will.
Yeah, right. And that, I guess, if you thought that like the universe is so chaotic that like and indeterministic such that like yeah, our deliberations don't impact our choices at all. It's just like it looks to us like it does, but it's all really just like, I don't know, roulette wheels in our brains or something. Yeah, that'd be a big problem. But like I said, it's not even clear whether the world is deterministic or indeterministic, but it certainly seems like there's at least these connections between what we do and these earlier causes of them that explain what we do. And that seems to me like, even if it is indeterministic, it's fine for freedom and responsibility.
So, if there was some percentage of our choices that happen due to random fluctuations, would you just say that's those cases we don't have free will, but we do in the other cases, and so it's not really a big deal?
I might still say it's a big deal, especially if we're constantly thinking that those unfree ones were just like the others, the free ones. Um, but like in terms of like preserving our practices of freedom, of responsibility, of holding each other responsible, it wouldn't undermine them. So it wouldn't be as big a deal as if they were all random.
And if free will is these criterion that you listed, the ability to be affected by reasons, could we potentially put this in a computer chip and give it to a computer someday? Because you thought there was a substantive difference between the way AIs assess things and the way humans do. I'm a big proponent that I think that we will be able to produce consciousness in AIs. So by
Okay.
giving them this computer chip with this ability to be receptive to reasons, would they then have free will?
Yeah, I guess I'm unsure whether you can have I'm unsure about whether AI will be conscious, whether that's possible. If it is, yeah, I think who knows when that becomes feasible, but it is in principle possible. So you could have a free robot. And there's pretty good science fiction stories that make that idea pretty plausible. I just showed in one of my philosophy classes here at Samford an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation called "The Measure of a Man." That's all about whether Data gets to decide for himself whether he's going to be in Starfleet or whether he has free will in a way. It looks pretty. I mean, he looks like a human because he's a an android, but like he also looks like he's got free will, even if his designer made him that way. So I don't know. It seems like it's pretty plausible to me.
Yeah, would there be a way to like tell the difference if we did get something like an AI that seemed conscious to us, could make all what looked like decisions in every way?
Hmm.
And it seemed like they were receptive to reason, so we could like present them a reason. You're more likely to win if you play on black or whatever, and they made a decision like, okay, I'll play on black. Would that be a way to establish they do have free will? Is that would you conclude that they had free will and consciousness at that point?
Yeah, I mean, if I got all the same evidence of yeah, their sensitivity to reasons and all that as from another human being, I'd say yeah. The thing is, like, and this is a big worry about AI and making AI as sophisticated as it seems like we could. It might be really hard to tell whether what it's like on the inside. I mean, this isn't so much a free will problem as it is a consciousness and philosophy of mind problem. That um, if it's really hard to tell, and if they are conscious and they are responsible, like our ethical obligations are very different than if they aren't conscious and responsible. It's now like this huge moral uncertainty what we owe to these beings and what we can and can't do to them, which is some of what that episode of Star Trek is grappling with, I suppose.
Yeah, because that was the way I kind of approach it is I see humans as essentially just really advanced robots, and so I think that moral responsibility, in my view, is essentially whether or not their programming is going to determine them to hurt other people or not, and or help other people or not. I don't think anybody is inherently blameworthy. I don't think that makes sense in my view. It seems more like they are predetermined by programmed forces of nature or whatever. And the more important thing seems to be to create a world such that it is morally perfect. And the moral responsibility of the individuals doesn't really seem to make a difference to me. I don't really think it matters. Like, if I was God, I would just create a world where it was impossible to force anyone to do anything they didn't consent to, and then just go, have fun, eat as much chocolate ice cream as you want or whatever. And that seems to be it seems to be more important to create a moral world than whether or not people have moral responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah, this is good because I mean, one interesting question that I haven't really given enough thought to, I don't haven't really focused on it in my research is like it's about the value of morally responsible agency in the first place. There is some work on this, especially by people interested in the issues with God and the problem of evil on the value of free will, why God might have reason to allow certain kinds of freedom. Um, but yeah, it can look very attractive to forego certain kinds of freedom for certain, yeah, to avoid certain evils. I think it seems like there's got to be more to the story of if even if free will and moral responsibility are valuable, like it's not the sort of thing that it's valuable to have it even if it's going to lead to just awful, consequences. I guess I'm tempted to that too, but I need to think more about that.
What is your view on the libertarian free will? Like, to me, it doesn't seem to make much sense to say that we are like causa sui, we can just make things happen on our own,
Hmm.
self-caused choices. I do not, I cannot coherently picture how that can work in my mind. To me, it seems like it must be the case that either you do things for prior reasons or you do things purely deterministic randomness for no reason. And I don't see
Yeah.
a way to get that libertarian thing there.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, one thing to say is maybe some of the most widely read libertarians have that more extreme idea of like being the cause of oneself, or I mean, one even says we're unmoved movers like God. And that seems pretty um, bold, right, for finite creatures to claim for themselves. Um, yeah, I do think that it's hard to even make sense of what that would mean. Like, I think that there might be an incoherence in the idea of being a self cause, like literally the cause of oneself. That said, there are other libertarians, and like in in the recent literature, they've sort of divided into two camps. There's really three, but like most into two camps. Those who think we can account for agency and free agency in particular in terms of events that involve agents, like an agent's having a reason or having a desire to act in a certain way. Um, as long as that event, the agent's having the reason to act in a particular way, is indeterministically bringing about their action, right? You might have libertarian free will. Um, the other way to go, and this is more of that old school way, is to think of um, the causation that's at play in free action as causation by the agent as a substance, maybe like, you know, an immaterial soul or something like this. That is, you can't explain things in a way that um, reduces to events involving the agent. And one of the big debates between those two types of libertarianism is whether you can really get explanation of action for reasons on one view or the other. It seems like the event causal type of view has an easy time with acting for reasons because it's the having a reason that brings about the action on that kind of causal explanation. For the agent causal view, one of the big puzzles is how do you make sense of acting for a reason if the agent just directly kind of causes the action? It's not the having of the reason that brings it about. So, if people are interested in that, I did interview an event causalist and an agent causalist. My friend Matt and I did on our podcast, The Free Will Show. This was the start of our season two, and we talked to two of the two big proponents of libertarianism today. Chris Franklin wrote a book, kind of defending the more moderate or modest, I should say, event causal approach, and then Tim O'Connor, who's done a lot of work to defend the agent causal approach. So you can kind of see it, they seem to disagree a lot, and then on certain key things, they actually are closer to one another than you might think. So I don't know. I guess for me, the my take on libertarianism is just it has this requirement that you satisfy the compatibilist conditions on free action, and also this further thing, you can't be determined. And unless there's some reason to think that not being determined somehow enhances the agent's control, or that would make the difference, well, then I think there's no reason to kind of take on that extra commitment of requiring indeterminacy. So again, I think compatibilism is kind of like, to me, it seems like a default position. Unless you're given some reason for thinking freedom and determinism are incompatible, just say, well, for all we know, they are. And if you have responses to arguments for incompatibilism, if you have reasons for thinking that, the libertarians' distinctive requirements don't really add anything to freedom, then, well, you might as well still be a compatibilist, right? You get a simpler theory.
What does adding a soul do to the argument? Because from my perspective, it doesn't seem to make a difference whether we're determined by material stuff or determined by material reasons versus immaterial reasons. So, like, if presenting a
Yeah.
reason changes my brain state in such a way that it can do something, that doesn't seem to be any different than if you're presenting a reason changes my soul stuff in such a way that it makes me some difference. So, why would it have any effect at all to say that there's a soul there?
Yeah, I guess I tend to think that you're exactly right. There's no relevant difference there, which is interesting because especially among scientists who talk about free will, they often put things in terms of whether we have a soul or not, and that making a difference to freedom. That's hard to see exactly why it would make a difference. I guess for someone who's an agent causal libertarian, like I think Tim O'Connor is, he definitely did a nice job of representing the view on our podcast. But uh, it's not so much that it's not so much that you need the soul to get freedom. It's that, well, the best way of accounting for acting in the first place, and so free acting too, is by explaining the action as the consequence of the agent's activity and not just some events. So this gets into some broader kind of meta philosophical issues about, maybe not meta philosophical, but like in terms of your broader philosophical commitments, are you more of a substance causationist in general or an event causationist in general? I think the field has been pretty dominated since David Hume by thinking of things in terms of event causation, but that wasn't the majority view for millennia before that, and some people today are trying to revive a kind of Aristotelian alternative that involves substances. So it seems like actually both Chris and Tim on the podcast said the issue of event versus agent causal views turns out to be orthogonal to the free will debate. It's more about which kinds of explanations do you want in your philosophy and your in, explaining actions, and then whichever one you want, you put that in with your view of free will. And so there are agent causal compatibilists out there. They're not as there are fewer of them than there are agent causal libertarians, but I think that highlights nicely that, well, you could think events cause or agents cause, and you could have either kind of view of free will.
Awesome. So we've been going for about an hour and a half. Do you want to give a shout out to your podcast again so people can find that?
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Thanks so much. This has been a lot of fun, and I was kind of surprised that we ended up seeming to agree on more than I would have expected. So that was kind of nice too. Um, the podcast is called The Free Will Show, and if you search that in YouTube or your podcast platform, it should come up right away. We do have a website called thefreewillshow.com, and you can stream episodes there and um, read about what we've done in the past several seasons. The first season was kind of an introduction to the free will debate. Uh, some of that we kind of touched on here, but if you want more details on like the consequence argument or the manipulation argument or Frankfurt cases, we'll have whole episodes devoted to each of those topics. In the second season, we looked at views on free will and determinism. So we looked at like 3 different libertarian views, skeptical views, some compatibilist views, some views that don't fit neatly into those categories. We did a whole season on that. And then we did our third season on free will and science, looking at like neuroscience, psychology, and physics, various challenges to free will or ways of using empirical research in those disciplines to bear on the free will debate. And then our current season, which is airing right now, is season 4. We're looking at just whatever, typically people that are earlier in their career, but whatever scholars are working on on topics related to free will right now. So it's sort of cutting edge stuff.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it. Really enjoyed chatting with you. And I will let you go. You can just close the screen whenever you want. I'm going to start the after show.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. This was a lot of fun.
Talk to you later. All right, guys. After show time. Discord. Go down over here. Discord. After show. And get my keyboard. And pin. How do I pin stuff? Go over here. https:// I believe that is correct. Let's check to make sure that's correct. That's not correct. All right, there we go. That one should work. Pin message. All right, click on that one. Did it work? Yeah, it worked. Okay, that one worked. All right, after show, guys. How's it going? Global virus foul. How's it going?
Doing pretty good. How's it going?
All right, what is that animal picture you have?
Kiwi.
Kiwi. That's a fruit, not an animal.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a pretty straightforward debate you just had. I mean, like he really didn't. Every time he said something that actually stumped me, it was just like, good question. Like it didn't really have any. Like there was no major back and forth. It was just, yeah, okay, you got me. Yeah, you got me. Yeah, you got me.
Yeah, it was more of an interview rather than a debate. But yeah, it wasn't like.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you summarize his opinion, his position?
Yeah, free will is the ability to be receptive to reasons, and as long as whenever you gain that ability, you gain free will, essentially. So I think it's an interesting point to think of. Free will is making decisions based on reason. So, like, if there was a logic thing in the universe, like if you're trying to make the most money or whatever, and the way to do that would be to bet on black in roulette or something, and you're presented the reasons for that, and the reasons then say, okay, oh, well, those are good, so I'm going to choose black, and call that free will. I mean, I like that definition in that as a determinist, I don't think there is free will, but I think that having that criteria as something that's important to give to agents if you were going to create them would be something I would agree is required for that to be legitimate agents. Like, for example, if you just create an agent to do whatever you wanted it to do, that wouldn't be legitimate. But if you were going to create agents, like in my best of all possible worlds model, you would have to give them the ability to be receptive to reasons in order for them to be considered legitimate agents.
What's the difference between will and free will?
Will is just, well, because I'm using the libertarian definition of free will. Free will is the ability to do otherwise, the magic stuff that I don't think is possible. And will is just essentially the same way the compatibilists define free will, where it's more just determined by things, but it's still mostly just your brain acting the way it is, which is fine.
Yeah.
So in that sense, because as a determinist, I'm okay with compatibilism, and compatibilism is okay with determinism. They just call a certain subset of determined actions free. So I think I'm fine with compatibilism.
It really seems like kind of just a semantic thing, doesn't it? Like where they're just saying, well, we call this free, but I mean, it's the same thing determinists believe, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Why did they dig in so much into that? I was gonna bring up the same point. They seem to really dig their heels into semantic, arguments, just kind of defining what free will is.
What do you mean? Like, all arguments are semantic, so.
Oh, sorry. I guess maybe just maybe more so. It just seems like everybody's that they're just talking past each other. So when you have a non-compatibilist and a compatibilist talking about free will, it just seems that it's almost deliberately talking past each other when it comes to that.
I don't think they're deliberately talking past one another. I think that many different terms change their meaning as we move on in society and discover new things. So, like, the term universe used to mean all existing stuff, and then we discovered, oh, there could be multiple universes. Universe is just our model of space-time, and then we had to change the definition of universe. And I think the same thing applies to free will, in that as we discover more about reality, we're going to have a different understanding of what the word free will could correspond to. And so if you want to make it correspond to something that actually exists, you would say it's more like the brain state thing and not like the libertarian thing, which doesn't seem to exist. And so as we change terms to more correspond to reality, as we discover new stuff, the people who are using the old world definition and the new world definition are going to seem like they're talking past one another, when really the argument is that we think that this term free will should apply to this set of things rather than those set of things. And that, I think, is more the substance of the debate, because it's the same thing with me and morality. I don't think morality has ought. So I think that the term morality would be better applied to not use oughts. And I think that's why they seem like they're talking past one another, is because really the subject is which selection of things should the word correspond to, rather than just talking about the same definition of the word, because they're not. They have different definitions.
Right.
Yeah.
So do you think that's the case with like Harris and Dennett? I know that they've gone round and round on this a little bit.
In many ways, yes. So Dennett is doing that with consciousness, where he's like an eliminativist, and he says that consciousness is not what we think of it as. He's saying that the word consciousness should refer to a different set of things than what people typically think they refer to. And Lawrence Krauss is doing the same thing with nothing. He's saying the word nothing should refer to a different set of things than what we typically mean. And the same thing is with the compatibilism and free will. They say is free will should refer to a different set of things than what people typically mean. So it's happening a lot. And Sam Harris does it with well-being and morality. So yeah, it's a pretty common thing that we try to shift the definitions of a particular word to make it correspond to something, some other set of things that we think are more reasonable for it if they correspond to reality in that way.
Yeah, Harris tries to break the is-ought rule with his explanation, doesn't he?
I think so.
Ought and morality. Yeah. Yeah, I think he uses the comparison. Oh, if you don't think it's an ought, then put your hand on a. Sorry, I'm
Hot
gonna
stove.
butcher the quote. Yeah, put your hand on a hot stove. So,
Yeah, I think that's
but you do
weird.
have a reaction. You do remove it. But
Well, some people can't feel pain, so some people don't remove it. It's fine. It smells
but
like
as
bacon.
they're yeah, as it starts to smell, or if they can't smell too, not only can they not feel pain, they can't smell. As
Well,
they
it
see
smells
their
good, by the
flesh,
way. So I've burned myself quite badly multiple occasions. It smells like bacon. It literally just smells like bacon.
okay, that might be a fetish. That might you might need counseling.
Because in case you didn't know, that's what bacon is. It's just burned flesh.
Well, humans are long pigs, right? So
Yes. Well, some of them are very round pigs. Make a lot of bacon. Thank you, Jen, Church of Entropy. Appreciate it. I have a debate tomorrow and Sunday. Okay.
With who?
Tomorrow is a Muslim on modern day debate, and then Sunday is politics discord, more philosophy kindergarten. What the Sunday
those
thing
are
is called
hilarious. That's the philosophy kindergarten's hilarious.
I agree.
Unless Mango's there.
now.
So
Unless Mango.
it's funny as long as it's not Mango. But
Yeah, I have to give credit to I think Lawson Harrison who gave me that. He put into a super chat that I should rename it Philosophy Kindergarten, so I did.
it's so triggering
good
too.
call.
It brings
Yep.
it's so triggering. I love it. You get a lot of people coming in. Oh, I'm sorry. What's the topic with the Muslim on modern day debate?
James hasn't told me exactly yet. I don't really care about the topic. I just go with whatever, but it's something either is Islam true or is Islam harmful or is Islam better than atheism for society? It's one of those three.
Is that the one that you had to reschedule or no?
I've had to reschedule a few of them. I don't know. I know one of the
Okay.
Muslim guys backed out and James was angry at him. So I think he replaced with a different Muslim guy.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Okay, gotcha.
But yeah, so I don't think it's the same guy because I think James is angry at the guy who canceled.
This is a little off topic. Have you had any more debates with regards to idealism, like clashes over idealism?
Since when? So yes, I have had those. I don't know.
I know you had. I've watched some of them on your YouTube channel. I'm just like any current ones. Let's say like in the last couple of months.
I don't think so. I don't think I've had any recently. Maybe like on Discord that wasn't streamed. It was just a conversation with one guy called Objects, and he was bringing up idealism. But I don't think I've streamed any.
Yeah, I've seen the Jack Angstrike one, so where they were ganging up on you, and you did quite well.
Yeah, I've had 3 or 4 since then.
Yeah, I know I've seen another. I just can't recall any recently.
Did one with Inspiring Philosophy. Bunch on Discord. Panpsychism with Philip Goff. Bernardo Kastrup. Did Bernardo Kastrup. There's a guy. Oh, another guy who I yelled at who was atheist. Has a funny little beard. Oh, Emerson Green. Emerson Green. There's another guy too. Has a bowl cut and glasses. Really bad camera quality. Can't remember his name though.
Bowl cut and glasses. How hard that will we find online?
Yes, does not narrow it down very much.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
yeah, I just looked it up. I think I did see that one. The dumpster fire with Emerson Green. Yeah, I did watch that one. That
Yep.
was good.
That was a good one.
There was another one. There was one other guy who had, like, I think around the same time period was the other idealist debate guy. I don't remember his name though. Dark
Yeah.
brown hair.
I swear you enjoy dumpster fires sometimes, so you can just sit back and let them talk and then answer
Oh,
again.
his
Exactly.
viewers like it.
Yeah,
No, but
viewers
it
like
takes
it.
the oh no, it must take the pressure off you slightly because you know they're just going to kill themselves, and then you have to just comment occasionally.
Sort of. I mean, I do like the interviews like today are, I don't know, emotionally harder on me because I don't have anything to like attack. It's easier for me to have something to attack.
You can push. You don't. I suppose you don't have to push back, and you don't have to do anything about it really.
So you don't get enjoyment from exploring, like what was discussed today, or
Typically not. Like I don't
Yeah, I don't
enjoy.
either.
I don't enjoy talking to people, so that's a bad example.
interesting profession.
Yep.
Yeah, you.
I
Really
I dislike
that.
standing at McDonald's significantly more than I dislike talking to people. Oh, Michael Ignore. I think I talked about him with dualism versus materialism.
Oh, I can't stand that guy.
I thought I did really well against him. I crushed him better than Dillahunty did. Dillahunty did terrible.
Yeah.
It always amazes me.
Once you know his shtick. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, you go. You go. You were
I was
talking
saying
about
with him, once you know his shtick, and I think with the Dillahunty debate, he was a little too charitable and assumed that like I watched that debate. I think he was kind of underhanded. I'm trying to remember, but
Oh,
it
I had
seemed
a
like
really good one with Consciousness Matters. Is consciousness fundamental? That was a really good interview.
I'll look it up.
I've got my finger pointed at my head in the image, and he got his finger up his nose, which is hilarious.
I've got to say, you must have enjoyed the paid-for mango debate.
Well, I enjoyed the money. That was good. Money is good.
It always surprises me how badly someone can lose and not make any sense, but you'll still find people defending them in the comments or agreeing with them.
Wait, really? I didn't really find those. I didn't read those in the comments.
Oh
but
no,
yeah.
not with mango. Not with mango.
Not with mango.
No, everyone knows what mango's like. But it's just like people with like Kent Haven or people who are visibly wrong constantly, and you're destroying them. But there'll still be people in the comments, and I'm not going to say I agree with you in everything, but you can honestly see when someone's losing a debate, even if you don't necessarily disagree with their points. When you can see they're losing, and there'll still be people in the comments going, "Oh, he's crushing you," and you're just going, "How?"
Yeah, you triggered Hovind. That was great.
That one was funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you were talking about stick. He has the same stick, and he's been using the same stick for like how many years? But people still debate him constantly.
It's because he's popular. Like, you get a lot of views from Kent Hovind debates.
Is that Kent Haven? Is that because his name or his followers? Because I'm not sure how many of his followers actually watch his debates.
Well, no. So a lot of his followers, like, he has a YouTube channel with 150,000 subs.
Yeah, but I think his views are dropping a lot. I've been watching people that will give metrics on Ken Hovind. So I think his viewership, his subs are still high, but I think his viewerships have been dropping quite a bit.
Well, like, so the debate I did was posted on my channel and Standing for Truth at the same time. And the one on Standing for Truth channel, I think, is like 1,000 views below mine. So it also gets a lot of views.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Sure.
How do you think that expressing anger is important? I've seen your some of the recent debates. You were angry and you left at some point. Do you think that it's important to express that anger in some visible way, or do you think that we can go through life without that feature, sort of?
Well, it's a
You mean Ben
tool.
Shapiro?
But yeah, like, if they're not letting you finish your points, then yeah, there's no point in staying. Like, they have to actually let you finish speaking, or else there's no point in continuing the conversation. But I think that expressing anger can be a useful tool, like expressing anything could be a useful tool. I don't necessarily know if it's necessary for anything, but it's a useful tool. Like,
All right.
Do you remember G-Man, TJump?
do I remember G-Man?
Do you know how many subscribers he has?
Mm-mm.
It's like over a couple of thousand, and I never got that.
I've done like 2 debates. I did a debate with G-Man, so it was me and G-Man versus 2 other people. And I've done several debates against him, I think.
There's a great one. What's the who's the female biologist? Humanoid biologist.
It does not narrow it down quite a bit.
Oh, she does debates on One Day Debates. Erica?
Oh, Gutsick Gibbon.
Yeah, there's a debate with her and G-Man, yeah, where I think it starts off with G-Man trying to defend his belief. Oh, is evolution wrong? And then the whole debate is just her teaching him the basics of biology. Just the whole debate is just her going through biology with him as he goes, yeah, 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 and then he claims he's right at the end whilst not making any points.
That's how they typically go with the creationists.
Oh, he wanted to ask about anger and then he disappeared. You haven't turned to a compatibilist yet, then?
Well, it's just a kind of determinism, so I'm fine with it. Like, it just means you're calling this deterministic set of things free will, and so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you're subsetting determinism, basically.
Yep.
You're making another subset. That come under social construct, then?
Social contract.
I like those that call it will and just get away from the loaded term free will when they just say will.
Yeah, I think it's more important and more coherent.
But without, how would you define will as in that
Desires, essentially.
But still determined desires.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like kind of not really.
You have an
desires.
undetermined desire to eat chocolate.
Yeah. Yeah. Not really a desire, more a force upon desire. Well, experiential desire. 12,000. That's how many he's got, G-Man. They can't all be liking him, though.
What video of yours has the most views? I think your Jay Dyer. Is it your Jay Dyer one?
No, that's like 4th. Top 2 are Darth Dawkins 1, Darth Dawkins 2. Matt Slick is up there.
Wow, the pre-sup action.
Yeah.
That's where it's at.
Does it affect you at all that it is Darth Dawkins at the top?
No.
He loves it.
Like, I'm fine with it. Like, I'm happy to talk with Darth.
No, I've never thought about that, but I was just thinking, do YouTubers get like annoyed when you don't like the person who's your top rated or something like that, or do you wish it was another debate that was more viewed? If you know, get what I'm saying. I don't know if you have an ego about it.
I think there are some YouTubers who have mentioned that where the videos they put in hours and hours into editing and making really well done don't necessarily get many views, and the little like funny ones they do in 1 minute with no effort get 1 million views or whatever, and that bothers some people for sure.
Yeah, it wasn't even really more the style, but just because you do debates with certain opponents, I wonder if you find that some opponents are more worthy to be like more viewed at the top than others, and you'd rather those were highlighted than others, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, sort of. So it's kind of like the Rainbow Pop Tart Cat has 47 billion views or something, and then if you go to the Stanford YouTube channel, they get like several thousand at best. They get less than mine. The ones that are the intellectual ones that are deserving of views are not the ones that most people watch. They watch entertainment. YouTube is for entertainment and education.
Yeah, because even the kind of long essay ones I watch, because I tend to do that now, the longer form videos do have some entertainment value in them. They're not just kind of structured, kind of just lessons or anything like that.
I
think I've watched the Jay Dyer one, I think 4 times at least.
That's 4 more
It's
times
probably
than
my
I watched
favorite.
it.
It cracks me up every time.
So I'm up to 2.7 million views on my channel right now.
I warn you though, don't watch too many of TJump's dumpster fires, because then you just get recommended the dumpster fires. I get a TJump on my YouTube list at least in one video on the screen, and it's always a dumpster fire for some reason, even though I know there's nice ones out there. The algorithm's learning. What one have I got here? Oh, I've got Ryan Pauley recommended to me now. Reasons to believe in God.
Have you tried Elden Ring yet?
Nope, I'm still finishing Horizon Forbidden West. Elden Ring is the next game. It's on the way from Gamefly.
How are you liking that one?
It's all right. I like it better on the easy difficulties. You can actually one-shot things, and it's fun. I don't like having to like shoot thousands of arrows at stuff.
I enjoyed the first one. I haven't played the second one obviously yet, but I did enjoy the first one. But it's just a kind of open world adventure game like most of them are now.
Yep. I don't really like the story very much. Too much talking. But I do like the exploring the world and killing big dinosaurs. Exploding arrows are good. Yeah, I don't typically like the stories. Mostly it's too much. The puzzles take way too long. They're kind of obvious and just take way too long to go through. Not a fan of that.
I don't mind that. I used to play like the old Baldur's Gates D&D kind of games, but I don't mind a good adventure game. But so you don't like things like Skyrim, then?
Skyrim was good.
Oh, okay. I was just thinking because there's quite a bit of talking in Skyrim.
You can skip most of that, so that's easy. But
I tried to go back and play Skyrim like about a couple of months ago, and it just so many people are able to do that, and I'm kind of jealous because I did enjoy it the first time.
Oh, what was it I was listening to the other day? You remember Daggerfall, the PC version of like the earlier PC version, Skyrim.
nope, didn't play it.
Oh, it was like 3 versions of Skyrim, 3 versions before that in like the 90s, maybe late early 2000s. That's still one of the biggest open worlds in any game, and that came out in like 2000. What games do you enjoy the most then?
Ninja Gaiden. Games that
That's
are pure skill. So like as soon as you know what you're doing, you can just start a new game and beat all of the new bosses with just starting weapons and stuff just because you know what you're doing. Those are the kind of games I like where it's just skill based.
That's not many of them, is there? Though, really?
Nope, because it's hard to do that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of games that I could beat with the first weapon that are those kind of games.
Ninja Gaiden, Ninja Gaiden 2, Ninja Gaiden Black, Ninja Gaiden Sigma.
Okay, One game that's not Ninja Gaiden. Go on.
I mean, you can do it with Dark Souls, but I don't like the Dark Souls setup.
What's wrong with the Dark Souls setup?
The stamina bars are absolute garbage. It's too slow. I don't like the menu system.
Yeah. I like Bloodborne, but I'm not the biggest fan of Dark Souls.
Like, get rid of the stamina bar, make it faster. Sekiro was pretty good. That was a lot better than Dark Souls. And that one you can beat everybody with the first weapon.
There's another one called Battle for something, but I can't remember what it's called. Another Japanese martial arts kind of game.
Bayonetta was supposed to be really good. I haven't played that one yet.
Bayonetta is fine if you like it. Some people love Bayonetta, and I mean absolutely adore it. I'm okay with it. Kind of reminds me of Devil May Cry a bit.
Dante's Inferno.
Did you play Dante's Inferno?
Part of it. I never bought it.
There's a lot of penises in that game. Yeah, like most of the game. It's quite a good-looking game, but it's very weird. But I think I completed it. But I think it was like that Gods of War, like.
God of War is okay. God of War I don't like because there's not enough stuns. You hit things and nothing happens. They just take it and keep going with whatever animation they're doing. I want things that you can like stun lock them and do counter combos on them instead of just hit them and nothing happens. I don't like that. That's what I don't like about God of War.
Yeah, because it's got that kind of WoW thing or World of Warcraft thing where you just walk up to an enemy, it hits you, you hit it back, it hits you, you hit it back, it hits you, you hit it back. Whoever needs health dies.
Yeah. Like, I wish the game I'd like to see is I designed a control system with two mice. It has WASD key on one mouse and just a regular mouse on the other mouse. And so you can control your movement and your camera with one mouse. And you can control sword directions on the second mouse. So it's like Skyrim would be the best one to do it with, where you can have your right hand control the direction of the sword and 9 different directions on the screen. And you control the camera and your movement with your left hand on the left mouse. That's what I'd like to see, where you actually have like skill-based combat. That would be fun because
there is something like that.
Well, there's a few games like it, but not quite as good.
No, I remember there's a game where there's definitely ASD on the keyboard and then the mouse for the slicing, but I think it gets a bit. I'm trying to think of the limitations because
there's Camelot does that, but the game that did it the best was Jedi Knight Jedi Academy. That game did it phenomenally.
I think that's one of the Star Wars ones I haven't played.
It's like the best one. Star Wars, Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy, and Jedi Knight, Jedi Outcast. Outcast was okay, but since it was too old. But Jedi Academy, the multiplayer in that game was amazing.
I think I've played Outcast. And I've definitely played. What are the RPG ones? The Old Republic or something like that. The ones for the PC.
Well, that one's a turn-based. That's dumb. I hate that one. I hate the combat in that one. Such an amazing story, such an amazing world, amazing soundtrack. Boring as hell combat.
Which one's that?
Knights of the Old Republic?
Yeah, I think that's it. Well, there's an MMO, Star Wars MMO.
Yep.
And have you ever played it?
Yep, but I didn't like that one. Graphics sucked. I didn't like. it took way too long to farm things. You couldn't do it solo. You needed teams to go do shit. I hated that.
You mean Star Wars Galaxies?
No,
Or-
SWOTOR?
Okay.
SWOTOR. No, the only thing I think about SWOTOR is I think SWOTOR, because I've played it through most of it now up to the update and haven't played it for a couple of months, but I think it does have a good storyline. You get different things, and party members leave and betray each other and do certain things, and I think if you can avoid everything else that's wrong with it, it does actually have a compelling storyline to it. Quite fun when it first came out. A lot of fun memories.
Bleepy bloop. Thank you, Cosmic, for the super chat. Appreciate it. Best regards from your German fan base.
You like David Hasselhoff, big in Germany.
What is the lifeguard show?
Baywatch.
Baywatch. That's it.
I thought you were going to mention the fall of the Berlin Wall or something like that. Because that was down to him, wasn't it? How are you feeling about Ukraine and Russia at the moment, then?
War? Yeah, it's war. Thank you for the super chat, Mikey Riot. Tom, have you seen Alex Stein's rap against Putin? Yeah, he did a rap during his next presentation to the, what was it, one of the Texas open to the public meetings in the politics thing, Senate or whatever. Alex is funny.
I'm trying to think how Alex Stein is now.
Prime Time 99. I did several debates against him.
Oh, is he? Is he the guy who'll just debate anything?
I think he's probably one of those, but he's the guy who's baby Tucker Carlson. He looks exactly like Tucker Carlson, talks like Tucker Carlson.
That's what I was thinking. The guy who went, well, Tucker Carlson's made some money doing that. I can do that. I saw. Oh, it was Flat Earth. Was he against you?
I think so. I think he did the moon landing fake.
Oh yeah, he did me landing fake. Yeah. Have you ever thought of just debating positions you don't hold?
What? Say that again?
I said, have you ever considered debating positions you don't hold?
Yeah, I've done that several times, a bunch of times.
Really?
I debated as a Christian against a guy who was a Christian who was debating as an atheist, so I did the Christian position. I've done Flat Earth on some of my Discords. I've done race realism, I think. Carlos, what debates, discussions do you have coming up? I have one tomorrow with a Muslim I'm out on a debate, and I have one the day after that with kindergarten, philosophy kindergarten. What was the debate TJump did with Alex Stein where Alex kept talking about rock buttholes? It's the one I did on Big Bang, I think. Alex and the Big Bang. Evidence of God, maybe, Alex Stein.
Why was he talking about buttholes?
The Big Bang, he's saying that it was like a comparison to sexual reproduction with rocks to create the Big Bang or something like that.
Is he trolling or does he actually believe what he talks about?
I think he's one of the people who I could say are probably trolling. He's one of the very few people who I can honestly say that about. Alex Stein, creation versus the Big Bang. That's the rock buttholes.
Who's the closest, do you think, to the line of trolling?
Him and Jen, Church of Entropy.
None of the big names.
No, they're probably not trolling.
Problem with Alex Stein is you can see him on Fox News in about 5 years.
Maybe, what's the other one? Newsmax? I don't think Tucker's going to lose his job anytime soon.
They could always do more mouthpieces like him, I'm sure.
Well, that's who Alex Stein wants to be. Tucker Carlson. My problem is he doesn't engage in the conversation enough with you, TJump, Alex Stein. So
I don't think he knows anything about the topics. So
that's what I mean. So I know it's dumpster. It's usually a dumpster fire, but it's just
well, he's funny.
some.
He's entertainment. He makes jokes. He's just mostly jokes. Just fine. It's good entertainment.
Well, if you're just debating it for the attention and you're just debating it to troll, he doesn't know the subject to get in depth with it, so he's not going to actually engage with TJump, is he, I guess, when it comes to it.
Does James in modern day debate know that? I mean, because it seems pretty obvious that he doesn't know.
James doesn't care. Like he owes anybody.
Okay.
He doesn't care if they actually know what they're talking about. It's more about entertainment value.
Okay, so that is his focus, not having serious debates.
Yeah, like Bigfoot. Does Bigfoot exist? Super serious.
Well, I know it's silly to us, but if there are actually like flat earthers, they genuinely believe that. So although that's, I mean, as long as they seriously believe it, but I don't know.
I guess James has to tread the middle ground at some point. He has to have like that, and I suppose if you didn't have flat earthers and people who were ridiculous, then you'd just be shitting on people who actually generally believe things, even if they're wrong.
I think he wouldn't have debates. I think he's having to kind of, scrape the bottom of the barrel, take what he can get.
Well, I think they get lots of views. So having flat Earth debates is actually a good thing for your channel. Like, yeah, flat Earth debates are really popular.
Wow, it's sad that's the case.
Fight the Flat Earth and Red's Rhetoric. Their entire channels are just debunking flat earthers.
Yeah, and what was it? Everyone tunes in to see Nathan
Thompson.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I'm going to head out. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for coming to the after show, and I will talk to you guys later.
Later.
See you later, Tom.
See ya.